Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. If you're a returning listener, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. So our guest tonight is an awesome guy. His name is Colin Potts. He is the COO of a company that does regenerative medical treatments. But more importantly, he is just an all-around positive guy who has some really difficult experiences in his background. It's one of the things we love about Colin is that he doesn't shy away from or deny the difficult things that he's had in his life, and he's very willing to talk about those things. Losing both parents at a young age, losing a couple of siblings at young ages, and he's actually lost a limb because of an accident that kind of spiraled out of control and wound up with him losing a limb. And he's just so candid and open talking about those things. We love his approach on that. So you're going to love him too. You don't need to listen to me talk about him anymore. Let's bring Colin on to the channel right now. So Colin, thank you so much for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. I'm so excited to have you on the program.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I loved our first conversation and certainly been looking forward to today and getting into some good conversation.
Yeah, me too. So, as we talked about, Colin and I had a great conversation a couple of weeks ago. We talked, our intro calls are usually 20, 30 minutes. Colin and I talked for over an hour. It was like a couple old friends sitting at the bar talking to each other. It was a great conversation. And, I explained to Colin how Salty Ginger Talk works and what we try to do. We want people to live meaningful and purposeful lives. You all have to choose what that means to you. Nobody can tell you what has meaning and purpose to you. There are some universal truths. People and experiences are always going to resonate much higher than material things and money. Nothing wrong with money, nothing wrong with material things, but if they're the center of your life, you probably need to take a look at how you've got things prioritized because you probably need to shuffle the deck a little bit. With that said, we bring folks like Colin on who have built really meaningful and purposeful lives for themselves because of all of the challenges that they have faced. And they come on and talk to us about what they've learned through those challenges, the kind of mental exercises that they use for themselves, that they use to coach other people in their lives to use when life inevitably kicks you in the teeth like it does to all of us. And Colin is certainly no exception to that rule. So he's the chief operating officer of a business called Regenerative Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. They operate in, what is it, 4 states, 4 or 5 states, Colin? You got 9 locations?
3 states, Maryland, DC, Virginia.
There you go. And by all outward appearances and in reality, very successful. However, it's been a tough road. And Colin and I were able to talk about some of those things. And I'm really excited to have him come on and share his story and talk to you guys about it and kind of share what he's learned directly from him so you can take those life lessons, incorporate them into your life, and help you move towards the life of meaning and purpose that you're trying to build. So, with all of that said, Colin, I would love it if you could kind of take us from how you got from where you started to where you're at, kind of high level, broad strokes. And then we'll go back and do kind of deep dives on the most meaningful things, the points of inflection, the things that are really important for us to talk about. We spent a lot of time kind of subject by subject after you give us the big picture. So the floor is yours, my friend.
I appreciate that. So it's been an amazing journey ever since I was young. Our family kept hitting adversity over and over and over. We were referred to as the Kennedy family because it was just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. So best way I can describe it is real broad strokes is by the time I was 33, I'd lost all my grandparents, my parents, 2 siblings, and then rolled into 21 surgeries, 17 years after an accident, lost a limb, and 1 year was walking, running, swimming, ran a 5K. And then 5 years ago, lost another sibling to pancreatic cancer. So you kind of look at the age when, I lost a brother to suicide, and, when I was a senior in high school, and kind of what that was like. And then you went into losing my father, my senior year of college. And that was, he had a very rare form of cancer and died in 6 weeks. And we went through that. And then in between, grandparents, along the way with that. So, and then, was had a sister who had just a horrible life experience, had been raped by a deranged uncle of ours, and she ended up taking her life, 2 years after my father. And I remember it was just like my mom saying to me, we sat at the cemetery so many times, is the grass ever going to grow over? Are we ever going to be able to, just live again? Because we kept going through tragedy, tragedy, tragedy. And then she gets cancer, and I was her caregiver for 6 years, which was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And what she taught me, and everyone has to make that sacrifice, as you get older, taking care of a parent or a grandparent or someone. And it was just, you can either look at it as a hardship or you can embrace it, and it becomes an amazing experience. And it was the latter for me. And then during that time, I started having all the surgeries after an accident. And then that was building up, and losing a limb. And really what that was a real low point when, you see so many people walked away from me at that point. And, I'm like, hey, look at my eyes. I'm the same guy, if not a better guy,
Mm.
what's the big deal here? But and breaking through that low, and then all of a sudden taking the negativity and turning it into positivity, and being able to walk, run, swim, and finish a 5K in a year, I think is pretty good progress. Because I just took all the negativity and funneled it towards positive results, and kind of got a little of the FU attitude in a sense. And instead, my phrase just became just watch, and in terms of that. So, and then, going through and having a brother who had a learning disability, who we took care of our whole lives, and especially after my mom passed. And he had got pancreatic cancer during COVID, and he was in an assisted living because he couldn't live on his own, and not understanding what was going out in the world and why we couldn't visit, and 30-minute visits. And I would bring, Lysol and wipes from our clinics when we get, shipments, because that was like a black market, for those items. And really learning from that experience, because we weren't close. And that was a really powerful, because I was the youngest, he was the oldest, and he just was like, you were always right. And I had to tell him no on him all the time. And but once we kind of got past that, and what we're able to do in 6 to 7 weeks of a relationship and how it ended was incredibly powerful. So all these experiences have kind of made me who I am, and that's where it's been an amazing journey. And I just like to say right off the bat, I have no regrets.
Wow, that's such a powerful story. And it would be easy for someone to hear you tick off all of these difficult things that you've endured in your life and feel sorry for you.
Mhm.
You don't feel sorry for you.
Right.
What do you attribute that mindset to? How did you develop that mindset? There had to be periods of time where you had to been like, what the hell? Like, when do the hits stop here? How did you
Yeah,
develop that resiliency?
I think it's a great question, and people always ask that. And I think about it because it happened at such a young age. It started at such a young age. And you think about your high school years, kind of everything's awkward, and you're awkward, and life is awkward, and you're just trying to navigate the teenage years and all of that. And then it was the frequency where you got through it, because you're almost numb, because it just kept happening. And it's not a great way to live, I'm not going to say that, but you're just in survival mode, and almost living to the fact where you're like, what is going to happen next? But the thing, I think innately, I was just born just a positive guy, and I was grateful for that. But I also realized I saw people who had gone through similar situations and similar stories, who were just giving up on life. And when you see people give up on life, and I saw a sibling give up on life, it really, you can either kind of go the woe is me kind of way, or you can really understand that, life is a gift and every day is a gift. It's fragile as hell. And so I think over time, the more it happened, it was more I had to stay positive to keep just getting through it. And then there was a lot of people depending on me, especially my mom and that after my father passed. And so what she taught me at Faith and people taught me along the way, just kind of galvanized you, the experiences I felt in a lot of ways. But I'm not going to lie, there were a lot of tough days, in the sense, it was easy to go the woe is me route. But I just was never comfortable with it. I just didn't want to, because it was like, I get excited when the sun comes up every day. It's a new day. And I always say it's an opportunity to change something in your life. So it's like, all right, well, I had a crap day yesterday, but I'm going to go live tomorrow, and I'm going to go do something better for myself. And I always tell people the most important thing is when you get kind of rocked like that, no matter how hard a day is, you got to find something in the day that was positive, and you got to reconcile those days and find a positive building block for the next day. And then if you can just be disciplined to just find that one positive thing every day, it just starts to build the mindset. And it's powerful because it's like, okay, well, I had a crap day, but it's all 24 hours of the day bad. Well, then you boil it down. It was probably 2 conversations, this or that. And I'm like, well, you probably had 20 hours, and being very gracious, most likely for a lot of people, 20 hours of not much happened that in the other 20 hours, but we focus in on the negative side. So building that positivity was it was really important. And, my mom always laughed because she's like, I never had to hold you when you were a child. And I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, you had to stand up your crib, wave and smile, and everyone would just pick you up and just take you. So I do believe there was, I was born with a little bit of the positivity. But I was just always thrilled. But I got knocked down so many times. But I also realized that it was a choice for me every time whether I was going to get back up or not. And that was the only thing I could control, was my attitude through all the crap and all the heartache. And, being a pallbearer 11 times already in my life, I don't think that's too normal. But you really see the power of what life is. And it's taught me to love life more.
Yeah. I love the mentality it brings to mind. So one of my favorite sayings is even the longest day is 24 hours, right? Like you just got to make it to the next sunrise. Like you talked about, just get through it and, find the good thing. It reminds me, I worked for a guy for a long time who's a multi billionaire, and, obviously a smart guy, hard worker, but, his perspective was what always struck me the most. He used to tell a story. And so like I sell groceries. So he's a billionaire from selling groceries. And he took over the business from he's third generation. His grandfather started it, his dad ran it, and then when he took it over, he kind of grew it exponentially. So when I left that company, it was a $25 billion big. But he tells a story. He at one point kind of risked everything and he moved the operation from one state to another state and built a warehouse on spec. He didn't have a customer. He built a warehouse and then went out and got the customers. And he thought from a transportation perspective, he could grow the business much better from where he moved it to than where he moved it from. But like it was lean days and his dad was still involved in the business. And he literally at this point, this guy's a multi-billionaire now, but at that point in his life, he literally used to, once he landed a customer, he would go pick up their payments on Friday to make sure he could make payroll on Monday. And he was fretting one day and walking around his dad's office, and his dad had served as a navigator on a bomber in World War II. And so they used to take, surface to air fire, and literally like holes up through the airplane and stuff. And he was hemming and hawing and throwing a fit. And his dad, this is you're years old as I am. So back when people used to smoke all the time anywhere, his dad reached over and pulled out a cigarette, lit up a cigarette, and says, "Hey, Rick, it could be worse. At least they're not shooting at us." And He said that really kind of made me think about what my mindset at that
Right.
point, and said, "Hey, I got to just stay calm and figure
Hmm.
this out." But it's just a matter of perspective. I'll never forget. It could be worse. At least they're
Oh
not
yeah.
shooting at us.
And it really is always a perspective thing, right? I mean, it's like, it's you step back and you think that you're the only one going through things, or the only one has problems. And my mom would always say, if you don't think someone has problems, you just don't know them well enough. And so everyone's has the things that they have to get through, and it's really maintaining just it's the perspective of how you want to deal with them. And but yeah, when you get pummeled and time after time, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, I got to say to everyone, it's important to realize that, but it's adapting a good positive attitude, and knowing that you're going to get knocked down, and we all do. But I'm proud to say you can knock me down as many times as you want. I'm going to get up, dust myself off, and I'm going to go live. And that's just an important thing. And I love to share that with people because, like, well, how do you do it? I'm like, you just get up and decide, and making that decision and having the courage to make that decision is really the strength you build. And that's how you build really resilience as you go through all of these things.
Yeah, it's I talk about that quite a bit, that the only way to build confidence, to get rid of fear, to get rid of anxiety is action. There's
Yeah.
no others. You can't read about stuff to help you
Right.
build confidence. You can't watch videos. You can't watch this podcast.
Right.
I hope that when people watch our podcast, it spurs them to action. And we talk about that all the time. It's one of my favorite questions when somebody has a problem. And my entire life, people have come to me with problems for whatever reason, which is kind of
Right.
funny because I'm not touchy feely or soft in any way, shape, or form. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that it does, but not for that reason. So I'm not judgmental in any way, shape, or form, and I'm a pretty good problem solver. So I think that's why people have always opened up to me, because they need someone to tell these hard things to. And so I'm a good listener, but I almost always ask the same question, which is, what are you doing about it?
Right.
Like, okay, got it. Like, that sucks. You have to acknowledge, I think it's very important to acknowledge things. We'll talk about that as we kind of work through your stuff. You have to acknowledge that the bad thing happened. Like, you
Right.
can't be an ostrich, stick your head in the sand and pretend it didn't happen. That's not going to get you where you need to be. You have to acknowledge it, you have to accept it, and then you have to take action to build your life after that has happened. And so that's like my standard question. What are you doing about it? You have control over certain things, and you're choosing not to take control over those things right now.
Yep.
What is it going to take for you to exercise that control? If we apply that to you, your first kind of really big negative thing was losing your brother your senior year of high school. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the mental process of that whole experience and how
Yeah. Yeah.
you kind of started developing that at that point?
Yeah, that was, we grew up, older siblings, 60s, 70s, in terms of that. I was born in 67, so you kind of know the time frame. And everyone would revolted against church and home and my siblings, the drugs and, everything that was going on, all the standard things that, kind of life pillars were kind of getting blown up, throughout society. And so my brother was just, he was an amazing guy because he had the gift of the golden tongue. I mean, he was just
Mm,
a very smart guy, but just could never put it together. And it's a lot of what he chose to do, and some of the recreational drugs and things, and really kind of got out of control and lost control of his life. And the hard thing was there weren't as many there weren't online groups. There was no internet. There weren't a lot of support groups, social workers, psychologists, but it was all really limited. You couldn't research a lot of these kind of things. So when I watched my parents, they were like, there's no ways, there's no app, there's nothing to do it other than just kind of go through experience and, hope that the values that you instill in your kids are going to get them through the tough times. So Kevin, as talented as he was, never was able to put it together, in and out of jobs, in and out of halfway houses, in terms of it. And, all of a sudden it was just, kind of things just started to head south. And, it wasn't for the lack of care. It wasn't for lack of what my parents had done. It was just at that point, someone's deciding to move towards taking their life. And sometimes you can stop it, but when people are ready to do that, it was tough because you could kind of see it, and they wanted to do more, but they're just like, what else could they do? So
Mm.
they had to live with that guilt, which is awful for any parent, in terms of it. So I remember he called one night, and because he always joked and he had this way, and like I said, the golden tongue. So you just never knew when he was being completely straight in terms of conversation. And he's like, "Well, I'll never talk to you again." And I was like, "Oh, whatever, And he had some bad run-ins and some bad situations, but I'm just senior in high school, and I'm just like, whatever, Kevin, type thing. I kind of listened, and I was concerned, but it was also like, it just, that was Kevin. So, uh, so I remember going to bed and waking up. My room was on the front side of the house, and, all of a sudden there's, three cop cars, and lights are flashing, and all of a sudden I wake up first because I'm right there, and I go to the door, and I open the door, and there's three police officers there, and they're like, your brother jumped off a bridge in DC. And so my parents came around the corner, and watching their faces when they heard this was beyond anything I'd ever seen. Uh, just the cry of a parent who's lost a child, and the guilt, the anger, that what could we have done? And the officers were great, but it was just tough. And I remember my father said, "Just stop. Do not cry. You're not allowed to cry." And I remember
Mm.
I sat there, and it was just, and then you go to school, and it's on the radio station. That was big news in DC. Someone, literally jumps off a bridge. So his name was all over the radio, TV. And I remember I got to school, and everyone already knew. And it was one of the hardest experiences, because you talk about leprosy, because you didn't talk about suicide back then. It was swept under
Right.
the rug, the hush hush. No one openly talked about a situation like that. So it was really tough at school, because all of a sudden it's supposed to be your celebration, and then all of a sudden it's like, now we have this. And so it was hard for me, because there was no one to talk to, and it was just, I've never kind of been marginalized and ostracized like that. It was like, it was like, you're so different, we're going to put you in another room. So that was a really tough situation. And my only thought was, I'm going away to college in the spring, and I was going to go locally, but then I was like, no, I'm getting the hell out of here. I had to get away from home, and to go into school in New Orleans. So, it was, I was excited about the possibility of a new start and change. And so that was, it was hard living at home. My parents were still struggling with it. My dad was had given up cigarettes, like you talked about, all the smoking and lighting up, and he went cold turkeys. So, all right, you lose the son, you're already tough. Then you go to cold turkey on smoking, you get into that. So
Yeah.
it was some rough times where I was like, you don't want to breathe too loud. But he was an amazing man, and my mother was an amazing mom, and I just felt so bad for him, because there was nothing really I could do, and just to see their sadness, and really kind of like, what did we do wrong? So as we got, through kind of, the winter, and it was in February, and then it was the first time that spring meant more to me than it ever had before. In terms of kind of a rebirth. And there was nothing like spring, all of a sudden you start to see life again. And there was a kind of a renewal period. And I've always caught on to that as a really big part of my life now, of how I like green. And, the first green on the trees, I call it spring green. And what that means in your life, and what it signifies is rebirth. And so we kind of got through that, and spring came, and I graduated, but it was just, it was a downer. I mean, it was just like, you graduated, and no one invited you to any parties or anything because you were still kind of, his brother committed suicide. You can't be near him, or you can't talk to him. And so that was really tough. And but then all of a sudden, summer came, and I was ready to go away. And the best thing, I'm so glad I did go away, because it's a great message to people that it's okay to move forward in your life after something happens. And if you change course, that's fine. That's a good thing, if you can do it, and not to be afraid of that, because we all feel like you're kind of in it, and it's like, is it okay for me to be happy again? Is it okay for me to go live my life again? And learning that lesson at a very young age with everything else that came was invaluable to me.
Yeah, really appreciate you sharing all that. You touched on a couple of things that I just want to reiterate on there. One, this would have been mid 80s, somewhere in there, yeah?
Yeah, I was 85.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so especially for men, that was the kind of eat your feelings era, right? I mean, there was men did not you were not allowed to, you got a lot of toughen up, shake it off, walk it off, rub some
Yeah.
dirt on it, soldier on. That was how it was for men back then. I think we've made a lot of strides as a society where it's recognized now that men struggle with things just like women do. I think women are, on the whole, a lot more emotionally intelligent than men, both innately, and then they're encouraged to be that way. But in our world now, it's good to talk to people about those things.
Mhm.
With that said, I will go back to my statement. Talking about them over and over again, I
Mhm.
don't know how helpful that is if you're not taking actions. And that's one
Exactly.
of the things I want to point out about Colin is he did take action. He did move forward. So I think it's very important to both get it out, talk through it, and then do something to move forward. You might not know what to do, but just start taking steps, because it's going to lead you somewhere more productive than where you are now. And then the second thing, we've actually had a number of folks on the podcast who have lost people very close to them. Some have lost their children, some have lost siblings, some have lost parents. And they all expressed the exact same thing you just expressed, that they kind of become a social pariah. Not, I don't think it's because people don't feel, I think it's the opposite. I think it's because people do feel bad. They want to try to make it better and they don't know what to say. So because they don't want to be uncomfortable, they avoid the situation. And to a person, all of the people we've talked to who have shared those experiences with us have said the best thing you can do is just be there. There's nothing you
Yeah.
can say to change it. Like, there is no good words. There are no right words. They don't exist. However, just saying I'm around,
Yeah.
want to go for a walk, want to go see a movie, want to do
Exactly.
whatever, just be in proximity. And they said there's a lot of value in that. I just wanted to bring those two things up based on the story you just shared.
Yeah, and I think that the last point is so important. It's talk to people as you always talk to people. Go hang out with them like you always hanged out with them. You know, don't if they want to have the conversation, they'll bring the conversation to you, but just treat them like, the same person that you've treated them before. Because that awkwardness when you totally isolate and step back is what people really feel, because they're just craving, and I know I was craving just those personal conversations that you normally had with people. And all of a sudden that was kind of eradicated pretty quickly. So I think that's a great point of, what do I say? It's just be yourself and be there like you've always been for that person.
Yeah, and be there. That's the most important. Be there. Don't ostracize them. Don't
Right.
minimalize them, because that's when
Mhm.
they actually need you as a friend
Yeah.
or a loved one. Just be there for them. So you said you went to college in New Orleans. Did you? So I know you're in sports and regenerative medicine, and so that is people that have been injured that need either rehabilitation and or prosthetics. Is that right?
Yeah, we do. We don't do prosthetics, but so what we tried to do is take things from your body to heal your body. So when I went the surgical route, it was, generationally, you go to you bump an elbow, you go to orthopedic surgeon. And you think about that, that's kind of crazy because if you have a heart issue, you don't go see a thoracic surgeon day one. You go to a cardiologist. So
Right.
it's kind of weird how we just done that. But generationally, everyone's done it. So it's part of the process. And so what we try to do is take things through your body to heal your body to help you avoid surgery, because there's a lot of time that your body can heal itself and will heal itself. And we do treatments like prolotherapy, which is a dextrose injection to create a reaction and bring the healing properties into the injured area. We do platelet-rich plasma, which is concentrating your platelets in a centrifuge, and it's amazing what you can do. You think about when you cut yourself. What closes up the cut is your platelets, and so when you then all of a sudden maximize those platelets and concentrate them, it's a very powerful thing for your body to help it heal. And then we can do things where we can get stem cells out of adipose fat and also bone marrow aspirate. So there's a lot of ways that you can do that can help you avoid surgery across the board. So that's why I love our medicine, because we're kind of we're sit in the medical world between physical therapy and operating orthopedics. So we're non-operative.
Wow, very cool stuff. Did you go to school in medicine, biology, those types of things? What did you study in school?
No, I was a business double major, 3 classes short of a triple major, business major in college. But medical had always, is part of me. I busted my shoulder up in 2 surgeries in college, and then, when I went through all of, when I left being a chef and Wall Street and doing all those things, when I got injured again and started having the surgeries, I went back to my finance background. And that was good because it was, I couldn't stand on my feet anymore, although I love being a chef and working in some fabulous restaurants. And creating experience and meals for someone and when they're special is such a great experience. Just I ended up rebuilding people's businesses. I just love when someone dumps a puzzle on my desk and says, fix it and move it. And so I feel like that's as the CEO of the company right now. It's if someone comes in at 3:34 in the morning, just dumps the puzzle pieces on my desk. And it's like, what are we going to do today? And how do we take care of the issues at hand, but yet still strategically move the company forward and execute to build a good business. So I ended up kind of rebuilding some medical practices, and it kind of stuck with me from there. And I've been with ROSM for almost 9 years now.
Love that. So I have a chef question.
Yeah.
What's the only acceptable way for a good steak to be cooked?
That's a great question. First of all, I feel like room temperature for at least 35 to 40 minutes, the piece of meat. Second thing is extremely high heat, just salt and pepper, and the minimal amount of turns you can do on a steak. So maybe you could do the cross stitch type thing pattern and flip it, but you don't flip it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's the right time, and really understanding the piece of meat when rare is rare, medium rare is medium rare, and that. And if anyone's out there, I promise you, if you want medium is always when the blood comes up and starts to come to the top of the surface of your steak. I will guarantee you that's medium every single time. And everyone says it's not, and I'd like, just try it. It works. So that's just kind of a secret. But I think it's minimal seasoning, quality beef, allowing it to sit at room temperature so that you're not putting something cold on a hot surface, because it takes that much more time to heat the meat up. So that's how I like it. I like a nice crust, and that to me is a perfect steak.
I love it. Absolutely love it. I always argue that if anyone orders beef and asks for more than medium rare, you should just serve them chicken because they don't deserve to eat
Oh yeah,
steak.
I would see people come in, filet well done, and I'm like, why? Like there's no reason for anything like that. So yeah, the menu options, especially today, are a lot cheaper at the chicken level than they are at the well done, filet prices.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a really nice cut with a nice cap on it, and it's perfectly marbled, and then they ask you to ruin it by cooking
Oh
it
yeah.
well done. It just drives me insane. I always say when I'm at a steakhouse, when they ask me how I want it cooked, I say I want to chase it to eat it.
Yeah.
Like I want it that rare.
Yeah, that's always that's fun because if it's quality beef, you really want to do you taste the flavor, and the farther you push that away, it's like it just becomes every other ordinary piece of meat in many ways. And so don't yeah, I love that of medium rare, anything
Yeah,
medium rare
I'm
plus
with
you're
you.
good.
I'm with you. So you get out of school. Sounds like you explored several different things. Where were you at in your life when your dad got his diagnosis? Because you said it happened very quickly.
Yeah, that was my
Oh,
senior year of
really?
college. So another year where yeah, so that was another year of celebration. You're rounding the corner. And my dad was so funny with 8 kids. You'll love this. He was like, he always was like, well, I got 8 kids on the payroll. So he always referred to, putting people through school on the payroll. So, and he was a self-made man, ran a great business and did well for himself. But he worked his tail off. And so he was all excited because he was like, oh, you're the last one on the payroll. You're done in, the spring. And he was living for that day. So, Christmas, I went home for that year, and this is 88, and he died in 89. So it's Christmas of 88. And so he wasn't feeling well, and he was grumpy as a bear and everything else. And they thought he had pleurisy, and and that. And so it was a tough holiday because it just, when dad's not happy and people aren't excited about the holidays, you just kind of got through it, and wasn't, and he felt really bad about that. But and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, they wanted him to go. He had to check into the hospital because he really wasn't feeling well. So I drove him down to Georgetown in DC, Georgetown University, and he got out of the car and he couldn't look at me in the eye. And he and I were really close. And so uh, he's like, you know, your mom will take a cab home, that. And he's like, I'm sorry it wasn't a good holiday. And he's like, just take care of yourself when you go back to school. And when someone who you love, or that person, that relationship can't look you in the eye, you kind of, I knew something wasn't right, but I'm also not going to guess that he had a very rare form of cancer, type thing.
Mm.
So he called me that night, and he was just in tears. And he's like, it was the worst holiday. I ruined the holiday. And I was like, no, we spent time together. It was fine. And he's like, I don't know. What am I going to do? I was like, well, just get healthy. You're in a great place, and so let's just get through that, and just try to take one day at a time. And I'm sure you're going to be fine. You're just, listen to your doctors and do that. So I had to go back to school the next day and flew out. And then I kept hearing that things weren't going well, and he was rapidly losing weight. And he was a big guy. He was not overweight. He was just a broad-shouldered guy. And so when they all of a sudden he was like, well, he's lost 25 pounds. I was like, 25 pounds, and it's been 3 weeks. I was like, what is going on? And you're trying
Mm.
to trade in school. And then my mom's like, yeah, this isn't going well. So she called me one afternoon, and she's like, they did a blind biopsy because they couldn't pick anything up, and he has cancer. And so I was like, oh God, here we go. And because he had lost another 20 pounds. So it's probably up to 45, 50 pounds. And just think about that in 3 weeks to a month type thing. And so she's like, you're probably going to have to come home soon. And so I got that call, and went home. And she's like, he's in really bad shape. So it was, she's like, he's waiting for you at the hospital. He's waiting for you. So I had flown from New Orleans to Atlanta, and then there's storms and all that. And anyone who flies through the South and you get caught in storms, it's usually a 2, 3 hour delay. So So she said, but you just got to be ready. So my brothers drove me down to Georgetown, and I'm not sure quite how we got into a back door that was open that got us upstairs, but we were able to. And we're sitting outside in this kind of breezeway between two buildings, and they're like, "You just have to prep yourself. You just have to prep yourself." Like they were so good to me, but they're like, "You're not going to be ready for what you're going to see." And so I was slightly panicked, but my heart was racing, but also knew he was waiting. So I walk in the door, and then I was devastated. I had never seen someone. It's like your dad. It's the rock in your life, and it's like, where did he go? And it was really tough. And so, to my dad's way, he had come in the door, and he's like, "You're late. Where the hell have you been?" And I'm like, "Love you too, Dad." So I think he was trying to break the ice. And I went over, and he just hugged me and was just crying. And we sat there for 30 minutes. And he all of a sudden was like, "So what's going on at school? What are you doing? What are you studying?" It's just like old dad, and
Mm.
did that. And he was just, so great and was trying to be so gracious. And then, he got really, he's like, I'm not well. And I was like, "No, I understand." He's like, "No, I'm really not well." So he's like, "I'm going to die." And that was tough, because we were so close. And it's kind of like, here we go again, type thing. So we had a really good chat. And then he was like, he did everything to keep his eyes open. And he was like, "I'm exhausted. I've been waiting." And I said, "No." And he said, "We'll talk in the morning." He said, "Come back early." I was like, "Well, it's already 4 a.m." So, I'm like, "We'll be back in a few hours." So I walked out, and I remember it was one of the few times in my life where I couldn't breathe. All the air got sucked out of me. I was like, "Dad," and the whole thing. So I went home, and my mom was amazing. And she's like, "He was really, really needed to see you." And so she was happy I made it home in time, and that. So we did go back the next morning, and kind of what the lesson was, what I said before, we just talked. Like we were just talking and just being together, as opposed to asking the medical questions and chasing the diagnosis. And I just wanted to spend time with Dad, and
Mm.
that relationship. So the long and short is, another dad lesson that's just crazy. So his cheeks were so sunken. I mean, it was crazy. And he hadn't shaved, and he was an avid shaver with a straight blade every day of his life, the generation. And oh my God, you look like a bum if you're not shaving, and that kind of thing.
Right.
So it was like yeah. So he said, "I'm gonna have you shave me because you're not comfortable being around me." And I was like, "You SOB, I have to shave this sunken face with like shag carpet almost and a beard and do that." He's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "But the mission is you don't want to cut me, and that kind of thing." So I'm sitting there going, "What the hell?" So so I do it quietly, and I was like, "Don't let anyone in this room, man. This is my brothers come in, I'm done." So I actually got through it. And so he was very proud because I didn't cut him. And he said, "Do you know why I just did that to you?" Because my dad was a great teacher of life and things. He said, "I wanted you to realize I may not be well, but I'm still the same person. I'm still your dad."
Mm.
And it was like a 2x4, because it was just so powerful of someone just teaching you that lesson when they're that sick. I mean, it was so selfless in the sense, but and again, this is why these things stick with you. And if you open yourself up in these conversations to make it real and just be there with them, these kind of things come out. But it was a hell of a lesson. And then he said, "All right, well, I got to see each one of your sisters, so you don't want to be a part of that." So he was like, "We'll talk again later." And so I saw him at the end of the day. We went home that night, and then we got the call at it's like 12:05, and because at that point it was just you know, the human body's amazing. You don't know if it's going to be another day, it's going to be another week. And, you know, we just had to get some kind of rest. And I think my mom was just, she had done the journey so much. And we thought he had actually probably a couple more days. So it was a little bit of a shock when the call came. So we go down there and he's, you just see that he was fighting because of the way his body, how he died. And so the nurses were all saying, and they're all bawling because he was a fan favorite of all the nurses and he was so kind to everyone. And they said, you know, he kept pointing to the clock and was adamant and so upset at the end. And everyone, they were like, he wanted to know the time. He kept asking, what's the time? What's the time? What's the time? And then when it was 12:03, they said it's 12:03. He died on the spot. And so my mom sits there and starts bawling, just bawling there. And she said, it was 35 years ago today on Valentine's Day that we were engaged in Central Park. And so my father was trying to stay alive to close that loop. And that was very much my father, to stay alive, to make it known that, you know, his love for his wife on Valentine's Day, and stay alive to spend that last Valentine's Day or have that memory with her.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So powerful stories like that, and things, again, those are the things that you pick up if you can allow yourself to, and not have that woe is me attitude. And you can have those memories. And like I said, those are the moments that galvanize you for the future and future things that happen for sure.
Yeah, it's those are such powerful memories, and it's easy when things that are difficult happen to you to get hung up on the difficult things.
Right.
Another approach that I suggest people think about is think about all of the experiences that led up to that, and would you trade having all of those experiences if you could avoid going through that difficult part at the end? And the answer invariably is no, I would not trade those for anything. My wife is by far the most emotionally intelligent person I've ever met, and she has said for years that you have to experience heartbreak and sorrow to truly understand what love and happiness mean. Because without the
Right.
juxtaposition of those two emotions, one doesn't mean anything. So you can't have one
Right.
without the other. And it's important to acknowledge and go through those. You can't skip them. You can't
Hmm.
pretend. You can't soldier on. You can't pretend it's
Right.
not tough. But if you think about it, the reason it's tough is because all of the joy and the happiness that led up to it. And that's the way I choose to think about
Right.
those situations. When something bad happens, there was a lot of good things that led up to that bad thing happening. And if
Yep.
you focus on those things, it'll help you move forward because you'll want more of those experiences. What I do, who wouldn't, right? Who wouldn't want more of those
Yeah.
experiences? And uh, death is a part of life. It's a shitty part of life, no doubt about it. But it's still a part of life. And I think you can honor the people that are important to you by moving forward and maximizing the time you've got to do good things, help other people, and to make the world a better place. And it certainly sounds like that's what your dad was focused on his entire life, you know, devoted to one woman, raising 8 kids, even with all the challenges that came with all
Hmm.
of those things, right up to right up to the end. He was committed to it, right? And there's such valuable lessons to be learned there.
Oh, yeah. And he'd be disappointed if I didn't say 8 kids and a 175-pound Saint Bernard, because that was also part of his. I had a 175 pound Saint Bernard and 8 kids. It was just it was classic dad, you know, in terms of that. So it's just like the cheaper by the dozen, you know, all his books and things and stories, you know, that we all read when you and I were growing up. You know, it was really funny. He was that style of guy. If people understand that.
Yeah, love that. So, I mean, you're just going out and starting your adult life right after you lose your father.
Mhm.
How do you think that impacted the choices that you made after you left school?
I think it was good. It was I'd worked really hard. I had worked at a summer internship the year at uh, in my junior year at Payne Weber in New York, and had that exposure and experience, and ended up going. That was my goal. I just want to go straight to New York. I was hell bent to go, and I wanted to see it. Didn't want to work to that. I wanted to go see what that whole world was like. So I was highly motivated. School ended, and spent a little time with mom, and then went straight up to New York and started my job on Wall Street. And it was an amazing experience. I was working 80, 100 hours a week. It was hazing in many ways. They taught me numbers, they taught me respect, they taught me what hard work really was, although too much in that sense. Um, and it was also the first time in my life where my values got challenged. Growing up Catholic, and all the things that I had been taught, all of a sudden you're in Wall Street, and a lot happens. And so from the money to the potential use of drugs to just women and everything else. The movies weren't that far off. They're a little crazy, but are knock on a Xerox room door, type thing before you walk in. And it was crazy. I'd never understood it and had never seen it before. But it taught me a tremendous amount in the sense of, if I would do the numbers, and they'd be like, one number's wrong, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. So, you really learned that. And I teach all my people I come in contact now, and who work for me. I'm like, know your numbers. Numbers are integrity. They instill confidence in people, and that. So that experience was good. And I'm 24, and all of a sudden 25, and I'm running, on the finance side, a billion-dollar division for Payne Weber. And the only way I did it was know my numbers, and was really good at that. And then I could build relationships, and people trusted me. And so it was just a kind of a meteoric rise all of a sudden out of that. And almost too fast. I remember my mom, she's like, came up to New York, and she's like, I haven't heard from you in 6 weeks. And she was my best friend. And I was like, she knew the hours, she knew all the things. And she's like, you look like hell. And are you happy? And, yes. And I like started telling her all this, and she's just like, just be careful. She's like, I'm not going to tell you you shouldn't do something, but she was really worried. And we spent the whole night together, day and night together. And it was that kind of mother-son time that is just amazing. And we always were close and had fun. And we always had fun in anything we did, but she loved food. She was a self-taught cook, Fanny Farmer and Jacques Pepin and Julia Child. And she was just an amazing cook. Sunday dinners were epic at our house, and no one missed those, and that kind of tradition. So it was a lot. And then I had the fortunate time to move back to DC, and it's a regional guy for them in terms of it. But it taught me a lot, that it also stretched my values to a point where I was like, I'm not comfortable with this. The further I went and the faster I went, I really had a time with it. I felt like I was selling my soul to the devil. And it was just too much glitz, and there's too much glamour, and there's too many things that were happening, that you almost felt like I was losing control of myself. And I thank God for my mom for just pointing that out, because she's like, it's okay to go do something else. It's okay to start over. You've started over. You've had to start over. You know how to do it. So she was just like, just be happy and healthy. And she's like, I just hope you look better the next time I see you. So, and when I'm telling you that, you gotta have to listen, because it's your mom. So that was that. So it was, and then I decided to go to culinary school, and I was going to take 1 year out of my life to go really see, because I grew up around food, and my mom, who was an amazing cook, and she cooked for 10 people every day, and did these amazing holiday dinners. And being the youngest, I was always stuck in the kitchen and just loved it. So I made that change. And, again, it's it's go follow your heart and find things. It was a leap, going, everyone's like, you're nuts going to what you're leaving in the finance world to go cook, Uh, I was like, but that's why I always encourage people. It's like, don't get stuck, just keep your life moving and find the things you love to do because I don't know what would have happened if I'd stayed. Would have made a ton of money. But at the same time, I know I wouldn't be here talking to you probably today and just so many bad things were happening to so many people, and there's so many stories with it that would take we would be on for 6 hours. But it's just it was there's a lot of bad off ramps in that world, and so I was happy to step away. And it was funny. I started cooking and doing all that, and it's like I found my soul again really quickly. And I was happy again, and creating experiences for people with food was a joy, and learning layers and layers of flavors and how to build those, and doing that. In the first time in my life, in my work life, everything was black and white again, right? And where I was paying my Wall Street, everything was gray. It's working, they were reshifting divisions, they were buying this company and doing that. And I was doing all the stuff that the numbers that would end up in the Wall Street Journal the next day. So I knew what was going on, but everything was gray and you were just living on the edge every second of potentially getting fired. So to be able to do something where you cook a piece of tuna right, or you don't cook it right, you cook a steak, the black and white was fun again because you just knew you wasn't living in this ambiguous world in terms of that. So the food world I really adapted to and loved, and to this day, the very first thing I remember after surgeries and stuff was always getting back to the stove because it's getting back to things you love in your life, and that's how you feed your soul and kind of rebuild after loss.
Yeah, I love that. And there's something about food, and I'm not a foodie at all, but I worked at a broadliner. So I've been in the grocery business almost my entire career. There's a couple of years where I moved over to a food service wholesaler, and you were a customer. And one of my favorite jokes is, what the difference is between God and a chef is that God doesn't think he's a chef.
That's classic. It's absolutely classic. That's awesome.
But I don't know. I didn't experience many people. I was miscast in that role because our entire sales force were people like you that had gone to culinary school and knew how to build meals and knew how to build flavors and all of the kind of finer things about preparation and serving of food to people for enjoyment and nourishment and the experience of it. And I was a business person. Like they'd be talking to me about the richness of a mushroom. I'm like, what's the margin on the mushrooms again? To someone explain the margins to me. But you need both, right? You need somebody that's got their eye on the ball and somebody who's selling the experience. And the experience is real because, you think about things like food and music in particular. Anytime there's a celebration, those two things are involved. It could be a wedding, it could be a graduation party, it could be a family get together. There's almost always food, there's almost always music, and it's one of those communal things that just brings people together. And so, like, I'm with you. So my degree is in economics, and I not once and like I've always had an affinity for math. So like I can run a lot of numbers in my head. I'm just one of those weirdos that can do those kind of things. Yeah. And I'm super competitive. Like I am probably the most competitive person on the face of the earth. However, it's funny that Wall Street never attracted me because those two things should go together. But I knew it looked to me like what you described from the outside. And I saw enough of that in my athletics career. I played baseball at a high level in college and had a chance to play professionally. And that sport lends itself to a lot of substance abuse because when you think about sports, like if you play a football game, you go to the town, you play, you leave. You play a basketball game, you go to the town, you play, you leave. Baseball series. So you go to the town, you play, then you're hanging around at a hotel for 14 hours. Then you go play again. You go hang around at a hotel for another 14 hours. You got a bunch of young, dumb, in shape men. What do? They chase women and they drink and use drugs. Like that's what they did. And I never did. I've never been drunk in my life. I've never touched an illegal drug in my life. I got I really have nothing against those
Yeah.
two things. They just weren't for me, but that lifestyle
Mhm.
never appealed to me, even as a young man, when it is more likely to appeal to you. I always wanted a family. I always wanted to marry a good woman and raise a family, which is exactly what I did. And it's made me very happy. So I love that you could recognize, hey, this was the path I thought was good for me. I'm getting to a point here, by the way, with my long winded diatribe. Um, I thought this Wall Street path was good, but I'm going to pivot because I think this path would be better for me. And you learned all of that by taking action. You tried things, you got feedback, you listened to the feedback, and you made choices that aligned more with where you wanted to be in life. That's like the entire point of what we
Yeah.
try to get people to do
Oh yeah.
with our podcast. I love that story.
And the thing that was interesting, one last thing about one good story. I knew it was I was Toto, you're not in Kansas anymore when we had a Halloween party and they forced us to go and we the office was in it was 1285 on Avenue of the Americas, but then they moved the back office to Weehawken, New Jersey, right first stop out of the Lincoln Tunnel
Mm.
because tax breaks and cheap and it was like swampland and they just built and it was all that. So they moved all the operations there. So they had a Halloween party in over on Route 11, probably 30 minutes away at this, I don't know, Hyatt or something. And I remember the HR director came in these dominatrix outfit and had a 30-foot whip and was just going around to employees. And I like, this is HR. I like, it was crazy. Like, this is HR, right? And I'm like, they were all like, this is nuts, so it was at that level and you really just kind of were like, okay, it's that. But again, it's just knowing when things are good. And again, your point about taking action is so important in life because that's where you really get close to the negativity vortex when you don't move, when you're not happy and you just kind of wallow in it. And what I feel like that does is change you to the past. And so, with my father and all these people that I'd lost already, um, I have siblings that still live in the past, like everything, every detail of every holiday dinner and everything. I don't do that. Life moves on. You have new traditions, married, new traditions. You find your ways and you incorporate older things. But, the past to me is like a book on the shelf. I pull it off when I need something. I put that book right back on the shelf and move because what I don't want to do is get shackled to the past because then you never take action. And never taking action in your life is when a lot of the things, not so good things can happen to you because you become very negative and all of a sudden I could describe it as the negativity vortex sets in very, very quickly. And that's when people get not happy. So your whole motto of taking action is just so important. And so learning this again, all these things at such a young age and doing it was really that's why I have no regrets because I learned so much and that's why everyone's like you got to regret something. I'm like no, I really don't and because I have all these experiences that I learned from and I thank God that I learned from them and I did take the action and I have been able to move my life forward.
Yeah, that's such a good point. So it's funny because from the time I was 3 until I married my wife, if you asked me what I was going to be when I grew up, I was going to be a professional baseball player. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Like there was no question about it. And so I go through college and I'm talking to scouts about signing a contract. And, for the average person, I was a phenomenal baseball player. For a professional baseball player, I would have been an extremely average professional baseball player.
Mhm.
And I loved everything about it. I loved every minute of it. I loved lifting weights. I loved practice. I loved the camaraderie with my teammates. I loved the sport itself. I loved everything about it. The competition, all of it. I loved it. However, as soon as I met my wife, I was like, and we, like my wife and I were supposed to be a summer fling. Like we were
Okay.
supposed to just, get together, have a little fun, and then go our separate ways. And a month in, we're like, well, shit, this is it. This is it. And here we
Yeah,
are
that's awesome.
33 years later. But I recognize at that point I would have signed a contract that I literally made more money working in a grocery store than I would have made as a professional baseball player in the minor leagues. And that's a really
Sure.
tough existence. You live 4 or 5 guys to an apartment, you eat shitty food. They sign some guys, they give you a huge signing bonus because you're really talented. I was not one of those guys.
Right.
And so if you're gonna make it, you've got to outwork a guy they've already invested $500,000 in. So you've got
Right.
to be way better than him. Even if you're just the same as him, they're gonna go with the guy they've got an investment in. And so I walked away. I just walked away and started my life with my wife. And people have asked me a lot, well, don't you regret it? You were so close. I'm like, I won the fucking lottery. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Look at what I've got. I've
Right.
got this awesome relationship with this awesome lady. We raised 3 sons together. I won. I
Right.
won. I made a great
Yeah.
choice. I've never once
Yeah.
thought twice about it. Doesn't bother me, but I took action. I knew it was important to me and I went after
Yeah.
it and I got it.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's perfect. But that's why it is so important to taking action. When we sit, we rot in many ways. We get into
Mm,
the things, and you lose your soul, you lose your heart, you just become just paralyzed, and you just don't want to do that. So have people around you that encourage you to dream, and to how do you get to those, move forward your life towards those dreams, and don't be afraid. Just take that stuff. You got two things I believe in. You take faith, and faith in yourself. You got to believe in yourself, no matter what in life. You have to believe in yourself, and for me, it was faith in God. That was the second part of faith that my mom always talked about, and I agree. Those two things together are very, very powerful, to get you through. But you just have to have that faith that I am good, and I deserve to be happy, and I deserve to be the best person I can be by making this decision, and just doing it.
mm. Yeah, such good stuff. You'd said a couple times you were really close to your mom.
Mhm.
You lost her pretty young in life as well. What was that whole experience
Yes.
like?
So we had had some fun times. I traveled with her after my father passed because she loved to travel. And as we weave the food thing through this conversation, it's not just occasions, it's like culture and history when you travel, and food is such a part of that. And
Mm,
so you learn so much about places and people just by the food. But so we had some really good times. And then she wasn't feeling well, and all of a sudden she went to Georgetown. I'm like, here we go, my favorite hospital. And great, we're back. And it's not good when you know the parking attendants and things like that. They're like, "Oh, Mr. Potts, it's good to see you again." I'm like, "Great, to see you
no.
again." No, not really. But so she was diagnosed with leukemia. In terms of that, so that was, let's see, in the late '90s, mid to late '90s, and so
Yeah.
she was a fighter. My father was Italian and full of life, and had this persona that just naturally people were gravitated to. Where my mom was Irish and very quiet, but as genteel and as sincere of a person that you could ever meet. And she was the best judge of character I've ever seen. She could just read people, because think people kind of underestimated her because she was quiet, and but she was amazing. So she was a fighter because she had scarlet fever and polio as a child, and you think about the '30s, what that was like, and really moving her life forward and doing that. So and she had already lost a child before I was born, and then had lost my brother Kevin, and then my sister Sheila. And so she's lost 3 children. She lost her husband. And this woman had the most impeccable, just amazing attitude in terms of it. And it was always faith to her that got her through everything, because we talked about that a ton, and especially after losing my sister, who had been raped by my uncle. And it was a real low, because someone takes a gun to their head and you walk in the room, and I wasn't prepared for that. It just
Mm,
you just it's horrific, and I'm like, how does this woman now find out she has cancer, still have a smile on her face every day, losing all that she had lost? And so she was an inspiration to me, and we just had fun, and just a great relationship. And in that. But it was hard. She was a very petite woman, and so she would go through leukemia, and just wipe her out. So that whole thing was interesting in that. But she was Houdini. Every time they were like, "Oh, mom's really doing bad," or counts are up, and this is really not looking good. Out of nowhere, she would pull herself out. Out of nowhere, pull herself out. And I'm like, who are you? Because you're pretty amazing that, I got all these doctors at Georgetown, which is a great hospital. And they're telling me like, well, this is looking, maybe 6 months. And then all of a sudden she bounced back. But each time she would bounce back, it was a different mom, and energy level and everything else. And they never it never went into remission. She was just always kind of keeping it at bay, but then it started to have effect on the rest of her body. And so she needed a lot of help. So I was always there and running to see her at Georgetown. And first thing in the morning, because I was still working downtown at 13th and I, and then go over and see her. And then I remember the famous day where I go over, I was really worried because she was having this task that she was worried about. And I go in and I run there because I was like, I had all these budgets due and everything else. And I go in, there's 8 nurses in her room. I'm like, is she okay? And she was just holding court. She's giving him a boyfriends. She's getting brownie recipe going on here. So, but she had that personality that people just she wanted to be around her. And so I saw the doctor had never seen anyone be able to generate support groups like her mom. She's amazing. And like they would come into their off days just to talk. But I'm like, and then one thing they said was, well, you raised 8 kids and you never had a career. Do you feel like was that a good life? And are you embarrassed by that? And that is the only time I'll ever see my mom tear into someone about raising 8 kids. And kind of
Wow.
yeah, I was shocked when it came out of her mouth, and I was like, then I was shocked with my mom, but I was so proud of her because when she went through it, I don't think that young lady would ever she'll never forget that day in her life of what that yeah. Yeah. And my mom was, like I said, very quiet, but boy, she could rustle up and get feisty when she needed to. So we went through that, and then things were really starting to slide again. So in and out, in and out. The leukemia was really taking over, in terms of it, and your body gets beat up, and your immune system goes, and other things start to happen. And so I go over there one day, and this is one of my favorite memories. There's so many, but this was great because it's something that's been a part of my life since. So I go over there, and she's like, "All right, Mr. Positive, I'm losing everything in my life. I'm losing, my independence. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this." And she's like, "Oh, Mr. Positive, how are you going to fix this?" And I was like, "Oh, I see we're in a salty mood today." And she goes, "Well, God damn it, I can't be Sister Mary Sunshine every goddamn day." And raising Catholic, I was like, that came out of your mouth? I was like waiting for the heavens to open and lightning to come into the house and, all that kind of stuff. But I felt for her because it was the first time where I really saw her emote about losing her independence. And,
Mm.
people who go through this with parents now, I talk to people all the time, and they keep telling their parents what to do, and like they're just going to dig in. So such a sensitive topic that you really have to be respectful of how you approach. And if you get the whole family pounding on, a parent at this point, it's the worst thing you can do.
Mm.
So I said, well, let me think about this because I wasn't quite ready to come out with an answer, and she was pretty salty, so I'm not quite sure anything I would have said would have made a difference. So I went home that night, and I was kind of struggling with it, and it just kind of dawned on me, and I went back the next day, and she was like, "All right, Mr. Positive." I was like, "Oh, great, salty mom, 2 days in a row. This is really not like you." So I said, "What I'm going to tell you, I need you to do this for me." I said, "I need you to commit to me that you'll agree to this, not knowing what it is, but you're going to have to trust me 120%. Like, I need you all in. There's no negotiating part way, apart anything. And she's looking at me like, you're nuts. And I said, I'm completely serious. I said, look in my eyes. I need you to commit to this. And she said, I wouldn't do it for anyone else but you. And I said, okay, here's the thought. Just because things are different doesn't mean they can't be good. I said, we're going to focus on what you have. We're not going to worry about what you don't have.
Mm.
And we're going to focus on what you can do and not worry about what you can't do. And she said, well, how does this apply to my life? And I said, we're going to retool your days. And I said, what's the best part of your day where you get the most energy? Mornings. We'll do all medical appointments first thing in the morning. What time do you want to be in bed? 5:30, because her body was wearing out. I said, we'll do that. Well, when am I going to see people? We'll see people during the middle of the day, or, kind of a lunch thing, or things of that nature. And she said, well, it's also hard having a lot of people at the house. And I said, well, we'll just tell everyone that they can stay in a hotel, and that's that. Although I think my siblings still are angry about that to this day, that I had to give him that message that, mom didn't love him. And I'm like, no, mom loves you. It's just she's got to take care of herself and can't do 3 square meals for all your kids. And that's
Right.
the reality. She wants to be in bed at 5:30. You're not need to eat. This isn't going to work. So the amazing thing was, all of a sudden, I don't know if people realize, see the cyclamen plants at Christmas or the holiday season. They're kind of a variegated leaf, and they have kind of the brown tubular stem, beautiful flowers. And I know you're going, where the hell is he going with this? So, but what happens with the cyclamen is when the cyclamen's not watered, it tells you right away. They just flop over. And as soon as you give them water, they go right back. And it was,
Mm.
I describe her attitude change, like the cyclamen that got water. And all of a sudden she was back. Her smile was back and all this. People came over, and I was a chef at that point. I'd cook her meals. Someone just had to put the oven to heat up, or those kind of things. So she could still do holidays. I would cook her holiday meals and then go cook holiday meals and do all that. And all of a sudden she was smiling again and living again. And we extended her runway so far just by shifting those things. And she got her mom spirit back. She got her warmth back. She didn't focus on it, on the negative stuff, which was great. And she was just living again. And so there were limitations, but I was like, well, let's just look at it and do it this way. And so you weren't taking things away other than like driving, which you just couldn't physically do. And
Mm.
I was like, well, we got to give up that. This is nothing you can do. But here's all the other things we can do. And so by focusing on what you can do in a positive mindset and on what you have, and it's like, well, you don't have to worry about what you don't have. It was just watching her reasoning and coming back. So we go to a doctor's appointment down in Georgetown, and the guy comes out to me, and she's in the room. He closes the door, and he's like, what the hell have you done to her? Like, is she on another drug? Is she seeing another doctor? Like, is she seeing a therapist? I'm like, no. And I just said, we've changed a few things. So we walk into the room, and he's like, Patsy, like, what happened here? And she's like, you just need to hang out with this guy. Colin, tell him the story. So I told him what we had done, and he was amazed. And but it was just so great to see her proud and living again. And it got harder, but we still focused on things she could do every day, and made it so that it was still her world. She still could make decisions. Um, so it wasn't like she was losing. But when you feel like things are taken away, and you can shift to what you can do, it was just an amazing moment. And it's something that after losing a limb, and boy, that was that's such a real challenge. So and I kept telling myself the same thing. So she ended up passing in February 7th. And I'm like, God, if she goes on Valentine's Day, that would just be insane. Like my father, I'm like, please don't do, this is like, this is going to get really creepy fast. But I'm like, knowing my parents, this is potentially could really happen. So she passed, and right before she passed, second last thing she ever said to me was, just because things are different doesn't mean they can't be good. And she was crying. And so that's something I carry forward, and I talk to people a lot about. When you face adversity, you lose things, and your life is different. And but life is still can be very, very good and can be great if you just focus on those two principles. And I stand by that for anyone who's lost or faced adversity or trying to find their way. And, because it goes back to a little bit of the woe is me, I can't do this. And it's that attitude that pulls you backwards. And then it's like, and that's where, we'll get to when I was able to, after losing a limb, was able to walk, run, swim, and run a 5K in a year. It was, things were really different and things were really hard. But when you get that mindset, it's a very, very powerful. So, mom in heaven and with all that she taught me is just an amazing thing.
Man, it's so good that you had those moments of closure with both your parents before they passed. It's I know that there's a lot of people, again, like we talked about earlier, they're not sure what to do. It's an awkward situation. They try to avoid it. They don't want to be around those types of scenarios. I think I think you'll regret that in the long run if you make those choices. I think you want to be there for the people that are important to you. I think you want those moments. Like, look at these things you carry decades later that are still very poignant and very meaningful to you, and it impacts kind of your mindset on a day-to-day basis. And they're just such powerful moments. You just have to show up. It's like we talked about. You just got to show up and be there for the people that need you. So, it's just, I think it's really cool that you had those moments with your parents. That's great.
Yeah. Guilt, if you don't face those things, um, you will have. I've seen too many people have tremendous guilt down the road, and because I should have done this or I should have done this, and if I could only do that now, and if I could only say this to mom, or if I could only say this to my dad, and so that's why it's so important to be a part of that, and as you say, just take action and do that, because you won't regret it. And I know there's relationships that are difficult that people have, and people don't talk and those kind of things, but there's always an opportunity to reconcile. And reconciliation is a great lesson in life, and it's hard as hell to do sometimes. But you don't want that hanging over your head for the rest of your life, because that's where, again, you're shackled to the past because you haven't dealt with it, and you haven't moved your life forward, and that guilt just, how do you erase that guilt at that point? I should have, and that's a tough thing to get rid of. So by addressing it and dealing with it and being a part of it, it's one less thing you can hold you to the past and allows you to move your life forward. Is it hard? Is it vulnerable? Is it difficult? Yeah. I mean, it's very vulnerable when you have to open yourself up like that. But I say this all the time, and I truly believe it, especially with my last brother who passed, is if you allow your heart to open up in these situations and you allow yourself to become vulnerable, because it's hard to talk about these things. It's hard to be in those positions. Those relationships will transcend into a whole new level. And a lot of it's love, because it's love driven, because you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And when someone's in that situation and they're not well, or they're going through something, and they know you're there 110%, that relationship and that memory and that experience will feed your soul for years and years and years to come. But that vulnerability and open yourself up, it's like, why would I risk that? But the power of what you will see in that relationship, in that memory, will carry you through. It's a whole nother part of resilience, and that. So don't be afraid of it. I encourage you to do those things, and as difficult as it may be, but don't miss those opportunities. It's easy to miss it because it's safer to miss it. But boy, when you take that action and you're there and someone knows that, it may be one of the purest forms of love in life.
Yeah, and you had talked about reconciliation. I think I try to explain this to people a lot, and I think some people struggle with it. Reconciliation, not holding grudges, forgiving people, that's for you. It's not for them.
Right.
It's actually for you.
Agreed.
And they get hung up on the why would I forgive them? They don't deserve that. It's not for them.
Right.
It's for you.
Yep.
You're the one that's carrying that burden around. It's the best way I've ever heard it talked about is the old, it's like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die. You're the one that is harmed from drinking the poison. It doesn't impact your enemy. And if you can reconcile and find common ground and forgive,
Hmm.
it's so freeing to you, like you've talked about. Those things drag you backwards instead of allowing you to move forwards. And if you just drop that weight, man, now you can start running
Yep.
instead of walking or crawling. And without that weight,
Exactly.
man, you can make good time. You can make good time.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why I encourage people all the time. It's those little things. And again, I keep using the phrase shackled to the past. It's just you're breaking all those things to allow you to move your life forward. Because if you don't, those you just hang on to the past because you haven't dealt with it. You carry that grudge, and the grudge is the past. And so that's where it's like, try to reconcile, stay reconciled in your life because it's so important for you when things do happen to move your life forward.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so now you've referenced it a couple of times. You had an accident that led to a bunch of surgeries and culminated in you actually losing a limb.
Yeah.
What was the scenario behind that? Walk us through that.
Yeah, no pun intended, right? Yeah, walk it through. But uh, so I
Honest to
love,
God, I wouldn't have made that connection if you hadn't said it.
yeah, no, I love it. No, I love that kind of humor. I know that wasn't your point, but I had to have a little fun with that.
I love
But
that kind of humor too. I wish I would have actually thought of it.
yeah, so I think the interesting thing is that yeah, I had an accident. It was a simple accident in a sense, and I was a chef and I had gone home and it's a long story, so I'll make it brief. But I went flying down some stairs and landed in the old topsiders, and I didn't know at the time. I had extremely rarely high arches. Rolled my ankle, and I didn't think anything of it. I had a day off, and I'd done two weddings that day, two weddings the next day. And I heard this pop, and I was like, well, can't be good. It was an old house, rickety stairs. My brother and I were living there, and type thing. And so I didn't think about it until I got up in the middle of the night and then took a step and hit the floor. And I'm like, well, this can't be good. But I had two weddings. So who's gonna call in to the brides and say, yeah, can't do your weddings, So I went into work, but as the day went on, it just got worse and worse. So I went to the emergency room and I got berated by every healthcare person in that entire facility for 3 4 hours. How stupid I was not to go to
Mm.
the emergency room, and wait a day before. So it was kind of the basic surgeries at first, but the tendons kept tearing and kept tearing, kept tearing, and then we started to get into the bone surgeries and really kind of like cutting the heel and rotating the foot and really changing everything. And it was just the surgery started piling up and nerve problems and this problem because they kept opening up my whole leg. So it looked like a giant zipper from top of my ankle all the way down to my little toe. And so we went through that, and I was going to the best of the best up and down the East Coast, and surgeons, and there were no alternatives like we at ROSM do now to have your body heal itself. It was just surgery, cortisone surgery, type thing. Cortisone didn't work, surgery. And then they started to get into complexity. So they started to fuse joints and they started to do that kind of thing. And then a double fusion and then things are that. And then people were like, you need to go to HSS in New York because they're like the land of helpless cases. And so I went up there and, I had at that point had 16 surgeries. And so I had typed it out because anyone gone to an ortho appointment where you can talk about 16 surgeries in
Mm.
4.2 minutes? That's impossible. You're dead. You're it's like, why even go? So I made sure that we went ahead and took care of that. And I typed it all out. So the doctor comes in and, he's a pretty big deal in that realm. And he goes away in like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. And I'm like, is he coming back? So I finally asked him, is he not coming back? Or this to scare the hell out of him. And so he did come back. He's like, I actually read everything. And he's like, thank you for abbreviating, because it was about an inch thick of surgical reports. And so he's like, you can help you. So that's when we were doing all the surgeries, and seemed to be making, I was like, well, at least I'm in a good place. But the surgeries got harder and harder. And we actually had a little success there for a little while. And I was on the subway in DC. And I don't know anyone who's gone on the subways in DC, but some of the drivers tend to like hit the throttle and then slam on the brakes. And so it's that kind of movement forward and back. So I was with my brother, and all of a sudden we're moving forward because we're standing up. And then all of a sudden the guy jerks the train. I go flying. Brother catches the lapels of my jacket. Everyone on the train heard my foot pop, and I couldn't walk from that point. And I couldn't even get up the escalator, in terms of that. So they did the MRI, and the doctor was really upset. He's like, this is the first time this has ever failed. And to 300 times. And, so I was like, great. And so they did, we're up to surgery number 20 in December of 2015. And then, he did this Hail Mary kind of pass. And he's like, look, he's like, 8-hour surgery. There was a lot wrong. I put everything together, but there's not a lot to attach things to. And it's not the way you want to wake up and hear from a physician they just had you open for 8 hours that he's not confident that this is going to work. And so they casted me for 6 months. And so it was crazy because everyone's like, well, the surgeries, what are you trying to do? I was like, I want to be active and I want to be pain free, because the pain was always the thing. And I was like, I don't want to live my whole life, and I wouldn't take an opioid, and I stayed away from all that. And pain, when it's for anyone who's gone through it, is very debilitating. So all of a sudden, like, I'm an energetic guy who loves life. 2 o'clock, I'm like, I'm done. These were really shutting down. So they casted me for 6 months, which is a long time to be casted. So I could have been in the crutch Olympics, I'm pretty sure. And then, I go up in August of that year, and, I was back in a boot. My foot had tripled in size, and the pain level was like a 7, 8 plus every day. And I was like, what the hell did they do to me? So I'm sitting there. My wife didn't go on the trip, and he comes in, he looks at everything, looks at the MRI, and he's like, amputation. And I was like, what? And he's like, there's nothing left to do, amputation. And again, they're in the limb saving business at that hospital. It's one of the best in the world. And it kind of sucked every ounce of air out of me. I'm like, well, we've done 20 surgeries or 20 surgeries on this. All the PT, there was a real sense of failure, because I was like, what the hell? So I call my wife, I go downstairs, and I tell her, and she hangs up the phone. And I'm like, all right, well, this journey's starting off really well, and I felt for her at the same time. I'm like, shit, your wife just hangs up on you, like, what is this going to mean, in terms of it? So that's where we, I went home, and then we came back up and met with the surgeon and the prosthetics people and all that. And then had some nerve blocks to make sure it was going to work, and had a nerve block where actually the first time in 20 years I wasn't in pain. And then I went home, and I woke up after taking a nap, and I've never felt pain like that. But it kind of proved, like, if they cut my leg, that, A, there was nothing for me to stand on, but B, it was going to be okay with the pain going away. So December of 16, I lost my limb, and it was amazing because again, being a frequent flyer at the surgery centers, nurses are crying. They're like, you're going to lose your limb. And my blood pressure was off the charts. And because it was all of a sudden I was doubting, and they helped me walk one last time into the surgery suite. And then it was the first time waking up without a limb, and really, like, I don't have a limb. And it was a real process at that point. And then no one came, well, I had couple people visited, but people were like, all of a sudden Colin's an amputee. There's something about him. And a lot of people walked away. And there were some really good people, but I was like, wait a minute, same guy, look in my eyes. I'm the
Right.
same
Yeah.
guy. Like, why are you different all of a sudden? But it was something for people. And it was that stigma of failure and everything else. So we waited to get the first prosthesis, and it was the lowest of the lows in the sense of just not having that support. Thank God my wife stuck with me, and I think it's 80% of people lose a limb, their spouse takes off, and there's some really high statistic, which is crazy if you think about it. But when you see someone actually physically look different, that different, some people just can't handle it. So
Wait a minute. You're saying, or Colin, are you saying a lot of people who have an amputation, their spouses leave them?
yeah, yeah,
Really?
yeah, very true. I mean, and it's just it's like the visual aspect, the whole that whole part of it. Yeah, I mean, it's a very common thing. So that's where I've been blessed in my life to have someone stick by me through all these surgeries, in terms of it. So finally, I was able to get my first prosthesis, and started the journey of walking, and that was where my mom's words, that the words I gave her about just because things are different doesn't mean they can't be good. And
Mm.
I started going to physical therapy with stroke patients, and heart patients and everything else. And it kind of got finally one day I was like, all right, if people don't want to be in my life, that's fine. I really don't care. I'm going to make new friends, and really shifted my mindset to kind of embrace the negativity and use it as fuel. And so all of a sudden, I go to this first walk, and they're like, just go walk a little bit. And it was pouring rain. And I had someone who I'd met who was an amputee who came and walked. But it was pouring that day. So I had a little inner Forrest Gump that day. And in the pouring rain, ended up walking, a mile and a half. And everyone's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't know. No one told me to stop, And but in the pouring rain, I knew that the tears were coming down my face, and I said, I knew I was going to be okay. And it was just one of those moments where I was like that. So all of a sudden, the negativity became positive, and I was doing crazy things, moving, and trusting your limb shrinks as you go through this process. And so you have to put ply socks on your limb, and diving into bathrooms or closets or whatever, because if you bottom out and it hits for me, it hit my tibia, it was
Mm.
incredibly painful. So, so it's something you got to be really patient with. And I kind of said, well, it's like a bad hair day, but if I couldn't walk, I was going to use my crutches, and I was just going to get out and go and live, and kind of, in your great words, take that action just to go live. And so finally, I was making really good progress, and I was walking, and then started swimming, and which was great. Didn't imagine that, and then began to run, and got a running blade, and that was really hard because my right leg is moves so vastly different than a blade, and you have to be really careful. So a lot of on the prosthesis, a lot of adjustments and things like that, and they'd film it so to make sure you're landing in the right spot so you don't really hurt your hips and all that. So started running and training outside the facility, and they'd strap a PTA with a rope behind me and be like, go, and just going through a parking lot at 7 o'clock in the morning and 30 degrees out, and just like having that determination just to get my life back. And it wasn't just for me, it was for my wife. I mean, she's put so much into all those surgeries and the care. And so, I always tell people it's just one more step every day, because ones and ones become twos, and twos and twos become four, and you get the multiplier effect, and you start to see progress. That's when you believe in yourself. It's like weight loss. As soon as you see 10 pounds or 5 pounds, you're like, woo, I could do this. And
Mm.
so it's just one more step. And I never slept in the sofa downstairs. I always got my butt up the stairs, and made that part of the mental part. And I was like, I'm going to get up the stairs. And I got to believe in guardian angels because the house was built in 1945. So the steps were literally like straight. And so you're
Yeah.
swinging back and forth with limb and two crutches and under your arms and jumping up and hopping up. And I was like, I don't know to this day how I didn't fall, but that was part of the mental aspect of just one more step to get my life back. And so learning to run and to do that, and then started training for the 5K. And I was like, boy, this is going to be something because again, the fluctuation of your limb and just not hurting yourself in terms of that. But it was a lot of days, the prosthetist and just going through that. But I met stroke patients and I was helping this guy walk. And I remember he some few weeks later after I had been discharged, but went back for an amputee meeting, and he's like, Colin, all the time he spent with me, I'm walking again. And because he swore he'd never walk again. I was like, oh, dude, I'm going to walk with you every step. I'll make it so we can walk down the hall together when I'm here. And so that's how we did it. And so all of a sudden it was just became inspiring to me. And you saw stroke patients and people that I was like, okay, well, I've got this, but these people, what they're going through right now. And, it was amazing. So it opened my eyes to being even full of more gratitude for the blessings I had. And even though so much had been taken away in my life, I was like, look how lucky I am to have this. And I would leave the facility every time for PT, and I'd look up and I'd thank God for the ability, the means, and the mindset to be able to get through this and to be able to get back to my life in a different way. But I was able to have the strength to move forward in my life. And so, the gratitude part was really amazing to me because it's something that I haven't shaken since, because it's something you realize like, okay, yeah, this has been tough, but then I see other people that didn't have some of those things I mentioned and were really struggling, So, but then all of a sudden I had joy in lifting people up. And remember, the first day I ran through the clinic, and everyone's like, "What the hell?" And it was just like, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. So it was really that's where the journey is taken off in a different level of now reaching out to people and doing these things and trying to inspire people to believe that they believe in themselves, they can get through any adversity and overcome anything in their life. But it's all the mindset and doing that.
It's funny, isn't it? That's such a great story. And I thank you so much for your candor and sharing all of those lessons that you learned through it. The mindset at which you attack a problem has almost everything to do with your success of dealing with the problem. It pales in comparison to anything that you've talked about so far. A couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were supposed to go on this cruise with our youngest son and his fiance. And the airline screwed up our flight and didn't get us there in time, so we missed it. And so my wife looked and said, "Hey, I think we could actually catch up to the boat at one of the ports in Mexico." So she called the cruise line, and there's this huge process. We had to go through customs 4 times, blah, blah, blah. So I just let our family know, hey, our plans have changed a little bit. Here's what's going on. And somebody in the text thread said, "Oh no, I feel so bad for you." And I responded and said, I mean, those are not fun days when you don't know what's going on. You go through all the rigmarole. It's not fun. I'm not pretending it is. However, I responded and said, there's millions of people that don't know what they're going to eat for fucking dinner tonight. This is a first world problem. Let's calm down on not feeling bad for us because, oh, this is terrible. I've got to go to Mexico instead of getting on my cruise. Let's get some perspective here, people.
Yeah.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's where it's like, yeah, it's just, it opened my eyes to such a different level. But you're right. I mean, we get excited about just some of these little things, and it's like, that's tough. I don't know what's going to happen when you get smacked by something hard, because if you allow the little things to trip you up like that, it's like, I always look at those things and it's just like, hey, I'm out. I'm already partway here or partway there, and you'll get there, and it always works out in some kind of way. And if it doesn't, there's a reason, and you just keep moving. In terms of it.
Yeah, it's funny too. We did make a detour, and the city we stayed at for a day or two because we got ahead of the boat, waited for the boat to catch up, then we got on it when it got there. And the city we stayed at is just a cool little city, and we probably have found a family vacation spot through this
Mhm.
accident of the way it happened. And I'm convinced it was because we just said, "Hey, whatever, we're gonna go have a good time wherever it takes us, and we'll figure it out."
Right.
Uh, I think we wound up having a really good experience simply
Right.
because we chose to have a
Exactly.
good experience. And again, pales in comparison to a lot of problems that a lot of other people have. Other problems I've had in my life. 3 years ago at Christmas, our oldest son developed diabetes at 29, and we didn't know it. And so he wound up in a situation where his blood sugar was at life threatening levels, and he was actually on life support for a couple of days. And it was really tough 48 hours. And so again, you think I give a shit about missing the plane to my cruise?
Right.
Wrong.
Exactly.
Was it inconvenient? Yeah, it was inconvenient, but let's get some perspective here, people.
Exactly.
Come on.
No, it's funny, but yeah, perspective on that, and having that appreciation, and just yeah, it's so important to be able to ground yourself like that. And but then again, I see it all day long, and you see it all day long, and you're like, really, are you that excited about this? But that's people have to learn their own way and at their own speed, I guess. But boy, that's with things that can happen in life. You're setting yourself up for some difficult times if you don't allow yourself to take a deep breath and be like, everything's going to be okay, and we'll move through this, and just be grateful for whatever you have at that point.
Yeah, it's every successful person I know has some version of that mindset shift
Hmm.
in their bag of tricks. And when they need it, they tap into it and they change their mindset and they attack the challenges that they're facing and they try to get to a better spot. One of the things that you've touched on a couple of times we haven't talked about in any length is your faith in God. And I find that a very interesting conversation for a couple of different reasons. Um, I personally am not religious in any way, shape, or form. With that said, I think that our society turning away from religion is one of the
Hmm.
biggest problems we have with our society. And I say
Right.
that as a person who's not religious at all. But I
Right.
really appreciate when we have folks on the podcast who can talk about their faith and what it means to them and how they use it to help kind of guide their life a little bit. And so I was hoping, like you've had all these things happen, and you've talked several times. Your mom was raised you Catholic, was Catholic, and you've always had that kind of in your life. How do you count on that faith, and how does it guide you when you're in tough times?
Yeah, faith is I'm most grateful for, because it's at that moment of what keeps you believing and what keeps you going, and what is that going to be? And that's where I mentioned faith in yourself, which you just always have to have that belief in yourself. But faith in God, and I never tell anyone what religion, how they should find their God or that. But when you think about the discipline of going 1 week to a mass, and stopping your life, and going to hear scripture and things, and believing that there is something greater than yourself. So for me, it's very humbling. It's like there is something greater than myself. And so being able to take that time, and there's value in that scripture, and there's writings, and not everything is always applicable to our days and to our lives, but at the same time, it's there's a lot of pearls of wisdom that you can go. And even for me, in the darkest of times, when people are in the hospital and things like that, just to go sit in a church, I would go down to St. Matthew's Cathedral, and there's a lot of people sitting in there. There's no mass. It was just a place of peace, and just having those moments in my life where I just needed to have that breath of fresh air in a different way, was really powerful for me, in terms of it. And I always felt like, God for me was always with me. It's easy to say, well, he's not with me now because people keep dying and doing this, but I always felt like in those situations, he would give you just enough that you would think you're going to break, and then you could handle it, and then an answer would come, and that's always the way it's been for me. So having that faith in God, and having that place of peace, and having those readings and pearls of wisdom, and again, everyone's like, well, this is about the church, this is about the church. No, I know there's bad actors everywhere, but at the same time, it doesn't take away from that experience that I'm describing as a place where you're humble, a place where you can learn, and a place of peace, and those were important. And then briefly, the last story that I would say is really the 4 days before surgery, and go up to the Monocacy Aqueduct with my mom, with my wife, and we're dog sitting this little dog, Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, and this guy goes by the bike, and it's a long story, but I'll abbreviate it. But he's like, "You're going to the parking lot." I'm like, "Yeah." So we get this little dog is like a little hyper fun ball of fire and energy, and so the way from the aqueduct is like 100 yards, 80 to 100 yards to the parking lot. So I was out there on crutches, and I was like, I got to get back. And so we get towards the parking lot, and Ann and the Pepper were going to walk down the canal, and all of a sudden they're behind me, and he's on top of me, like he's attached to my leg, and he's kind of in this trance. So all of a sudden we get up there, and the guy says, I had one of those boots a few years ago. And yeah, he said, I told the surgeons if you don't do a good job, you're gonna have to take my leg. And so all of a sudden he said, what's happening to you? I said, they're taking my leg in 4 days. And he said, I know, I'm here to tell you that we're supposed to meet today and that everything's going to be okay. So I'm trying to think, like, who is this guy and what is this all about?
Mm.
And every time we started talking about faith, and he asked me how I felt about losing a limb, and in that he would just say, "I'm here to tell you everything's going to be okay," and we were supposed to meet today. So someone says that once or twice, but then all of a sudden it's every time, and I was getting overwhelmed, and the little dog was not moving, just like a sphinx, and there was never like this dog to stop like that. So we kept going in the conversation, and he was asking me a lot of questions about life, and in that, so he kept saying the same answer, and all of a sudden I was getting a little overwhelmed, and because I'm like, who is this, and why me, and where is this coming from? And he looks at me, and he said, you just have to know that we were supposed to meet today. So I said, by the way, what's your name? I'm Colin. And he's like, oh, I'm Bill. And I'm like, this is Ann and this is Pepper, because I just had to break because I just didn't understand what was going on. And then it continued. And but he said, you're going to go through something in your life that's going to challenge you to your faith like you've never been challenged before. So we get through that, and so we get in the car. I had to lift the dog into the car, which I'd never had to do. Like, I'm like, he has a pulse, his heart's beating, but it's like he's in a trance. My wife gets in the car and she's bawling, and she's like, God's trying to talk to you. She said, you don't see it. This guy's piercing your heart and your soul, and you just don't see any of it. And I didn't, because I was just answering the questions. But my wife is very New England and very straightforward, and this isn't like her to, she's emote like this on that level. So we roll down the window when we go by, and after we're in the car, and I said, well, Bill, it was a pleasure meeting you. He said, do you realize we're supposed to meet today? And I said, I do believe that. And he said, everything's going to be okay, but you're going to be challenged, and your faith will be challenged in a way you've never been. And I said, well, thank you. And he said, no, I need to thank you because there's not many believers in this world anymore. And he said, do you want to know why you're going to be okay? And I said, yeah, kind of was puzzled by that and would love to know that. And he said, because I'm going to say a few words to someone, and he's going to take care of you. So I rolled up the window and said goodbye and drove 25 yards up the road and pulled it over because I literally couldn't breathe. I have never experienced anything quite like that. Um, I just didn't understand it. My wife's falling, the dog's still not moving. Like, please check Pepper because he's not moving. And like, for God's sakes, what is happening? So we drive out and finally gather myself, and it's about three-quarters of a mile out to the main road. And as soon as we got to the main road, the dog started like shaking water after a bath, and he was back, and we were like, what just happened? So that guided me through my surgery, and then the night when my blood pressure went up, they missed on the going from drip meds to oral meds, and my blood pressure was it was like 275 over like 150, and they thought
Yikes.
for sure I was stroking out, and I just prayed. I said, Bill, if this is the time, I got to believe. And all these people are in there stabbing me with morphine and doing all that. And support nurse was like, can I leave you for 10 minutes? I leave her for 10 minutes. She's like, comes in. And I went out completely, and I woke up. There's just water everywhere. And that's like, they're like, that was just your sweat and puddles of water on the floor. And so it was a really amazing experience. And I was like, Bill, I was like, because the nurse was pounding me and she's like, Colin, you should be dead. Like, I leave you for 10 minutes and you're going to die on me. So it was an amazing experience. And then I love my wife. She comes in the next day and she's like, you look like hell. And she had no idea. She's like, they tell her the story and she's like, well, why didn't you call? And they're like, because he was just about done, and so that's where faith, it means so much to me. And I really do believe, and so much has happened to me since that interaction, and people coming to me and through online and all these things. And I don't understand why, but then all of a sudden I understand there's a reason for me to meet these people. And, it goes back to giving people hope. And that's my main goal every day. And I wake up and the very first thing I say to myself is, let's give one person hope today.
The level of debauchery and hedonism that I saw in athletics was similar to what you've described
Yeah.
on Wall Street. It's never resonated with me. It wasn't even attractive to me back when in theory, it should have been attractive to me because I was in that stage of my life. So, yeah, I've just always known what's right for me and what's important to me. And fortunately, I've done a really good job of both staying focused on that and then building my life around it. And that's worked out really well for me.
Absolutely. All right, my friend. Well, go have a great evening, and appreciate the opportunity and look forward to staying in
Yeah,
touch.
me too, Colin. Thanks so much. Really appreciate the time. Okay.
All right, my friend.
Have a great
All
night.
right, take good care.
Bye-bye. All right, guys, there you go. So, yeah, like we said, we did not oversell Colin in any way, shape, or form. Love his message of positivity, talked through all of the challenges that he faced in his life. Absolutely love his phrase, just because things are different doesn't mean they can't be good, right? That's such a positive way to look at change in your life. He's got his website, he's got his blog, he's writing a book that's not published yet, but when it comes out, we'll get you the link to that so you can check his book out and bring him back onto the channel as well. And yeah, just really appreciative of Colin coming on and sharing his message of resilience and hope and positivity. It's such a great way to think about life and a great way to approach life. So thanks again, Colin. Really excited to bring you back on. As soon as you're ready to publish that book, you give us a shout. We'll bring you right back on here. So just really appreciative we had him on. All right, guys, there you go. So, yeah, like we said, we did not oversell Colin in any way, shape, or form. Love his message of positivity, talked through all of the challenges that he faced in his life. Absolutely love his phrase. James puts it up over here every day. Head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. Links to all our social media accounts are available there. We publish a newsletter every weekday you can subscribe to there. Make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you consume it on. We're going to keep having awesome guests like Colin on that are going to share their life experiences and what they've learned from those, how they've built lives of meaning and purpose from what they've learned through the challenges in their life. You don't want to miss any of those awesome folks because it's great learning for you to use in your life. So make sure you catch our next episode. We'll see you there.